So it is my great pleasure to introduce Dr. Etienne Sibille. He is a professor at University of Toronto and CEO and co-founder of Dimona Therapeutics. And I first met Etienne almost 20 years ago now as a brand new graduate student when I walked into his office, and he showed me some of the coolest science I've ever seen. He is my graduate student thesis advisor, and I'm really excited to hear about what he is up to now.
Thank you very much. This is working well, good. Thank you, Christine, for the kind invitation, and the Buck for hosting this really wonderful event. Just a couple of words from me. I'm originally from Europe, spent 25 years in the US. I was trained at Columbia, Cornell, then Pittsburgh, and now I've been for 10 years up in Toronto, where I lead a program on a molecular basis of depression, aging, and interaction. So these are my disclosures. As Christine mentioned, I'm both academic and biotech founder, original CEO, now CSO. So over the last 25 years, my lab has been working on the molecular, by training, just to step back, if you want, I'm a molecular neuroscientist. I look at molecular mechanism. And for the past 25 years, I've been looking at cellular molecular bases of brain disorders in the context mostly of neuropsychiatric disorders. But very early on, it became obvious that we would have to study aging at the same time, because there were so many parallels, and this notion of accelerated or anticipated aging, we had really many evidence from the molecular point of view from the early on. So, and the idea is, can age promote disease, or can disease pathway, in our case, stem from age-related pathway? Recently, we've been, just in terms of background information, we've been more interested in the cognitive deficit aspect of brain disorders. And just as a little reminder for you, I just wanted to point out that cognitive symptoms affect multiple domains of cognition, from learning, memory, emotional control, decision-making, suicidality, etc. These are all aspects of cognitive dysfunction. They're prevalent. I've been working a lot on depression. We often think about this as a disease of mood, but cognitive deficits are prevalent in depression. They actually persist very often in the context of remission, and the best predictor of relapse, suggesting that really it's an underlying continuous pathology. It's also prevalent schizophrenia, bipolar. We know that they're present in the context of aging, and they define age-related disorders such as Alzheimer. Interestingly, cognitive symptoms in the context of depression, schizophrenia, of course, Alzheimer, are now FDA-validated indication for drug development. But despite that, there are currently no approved drugs. There's some intervention that may delay slightly cognitive deficit in the context of Alzheimer, but all neuropsychiatric disorders, whether they're antidepressant or antipsychotic, if any, they make cognitive function worse. So there's a huge gap. There's a regulatory pathway for focusing on those conditions. But so how did we get there? For us, rather than going for, I would say, looking at existing drug that may have an effect, for us it's been much more of a bottom-up approach. I often say that, I don't really do neuroscience. I do neurobiology of disease. I look for those weak links. I look for the breaking point in the system as potential target for drug development. And we've done that over the past 20 years using, large omics study in the human postmortem brain, in animal models. And to summarize many studies, this has led us to consider deficit in this canonical cortical microcircuit as potential causal pathophysiology in the context of brain disorders. So what is this cortical microcircuit? So we know that in cortical-like structure, cortex, hippocampus, the balance of excitatory and inhibitory activity are orchestrated by, first the information is is translated, is conduced by pyramidal cells that are excitatory glutamatergic cells that are under the negative control of different subtypes of GABAergic interneuron. These interneuron, let me see, yeah, can you? So, can you see my pointer? Yeah. I don't know, I don't seem to have good control of it, so I will just describe it. So in colors, you have different subtypes of GABAergic neuron that are characterized by different markers they express, different peptides, the cellular compartment they target, the electrophysiological properties, etc. Altogether, they regulate this excitation-inhibition balance that's critical for information processing. So this is like a canonical microcircuit of information processing in cortical structure. Over the years, I think this is gone off. Yeah, over the years, we've shown that the segment, the section of that microcircuit that is highlighted here in this dotted line is really the weak link. We've shown that this dendritic inhibition module, where information is coming, from other glutamatergic, goes into dendrites, processed by pyramidal cells, and exited. So we've shown that this module that is formed by those somatostatin cells, that those interneurons that are characterized by the expression of somatostatin that are specialized in dendritic inhibition, so they shape, if you want, incoming information. We've shown that this module formed by this SST neuron, the pyramidal cell dendrite that they target, and the alpha-5 subtype of GABA-A receptor that mediate the function of SST cells on pyramidal cells. So this module together, very well characterized. We've shown that this is the weak link. It's selectively downregulated in aging, psychiatric disorders, and neurodegenerative disorders. So it's really a cross-sectional, transdiagnostic pathology. I don't have time now, but we went on to show the cellular, molecular, biological reason why those cells are vulnerable. We published that, but there's basically an intrinsic vulnerability in those cells that has been maintained throughout evolution, but that explain why we see this deficit across disorders. Just a couple of examples, of what this data look like. You can see here on the left, and by the way, this is whether you look at human or rodent, the pathway is very well conserved, as well as the pathology in the context of either disease in human or aging and models in rodents. You can see that on the left here, between the age of 20 and 60, a normal control person will lose close to 50% of expression of both SST or alpha-5 GABA-A receptors, so two of the critical markers of this pathway. And on the right, you can see that the dendrite, those contact points, what we show here is classic Golgi study, where you can look at the details of pyramidal neuron, count the spines, which are those contact points. And same, between the age of 20 and 60, we will lose close to 50%, or maybe less, I would say, 50% expression, maybe 20 to 30% of those contact points. And we know that these are correlates of cognitive deficit in the context of aging. What we've shown is those processes occur out of synchrony with the chronological age in the context of depression, or to a greater extent in age-related disorders such as Alzheimer. So, next step, if you want, from those correlative study in the context of human samples, us and others over the past 10 years, we've shown that if you go to mouse model, to genetic or other manipulation of the system, if you basically downregulated components of this module, you reduce cognition, increase anxiety, depressive-like phenotype, etc., both at the behavior, molecular, and neuroendocrine level. So this suggests that the correlative finding in human are potentially causal. Conversely, if you increase the function either of the receptor of the cell, you reverse cognitive deficit, reduce anxiety, depressive-like phenotype. So again, all the evidence to suggest that this occurs in the human brain. Rodent studies suggest it's causal. To us, this is a potential good target. But next step we wanted to, since we don't have access to human data at the cell level, you can do computational modeling of human cortical cell microcircuits. So this is really based on anatomical biophysical properties of the same cell in human cortex. So you can recreate I don't know, I think if I go with the pointer, I'm going to turn, yeah, there we go. You can recreate with this model the actual features of those cells and the firing rate, and what's been shown by optogenetics. You can silence SST cells, you will increase the activity of pyramidal cells consistent with those cells having a negative input. If you now use this model to replicate the deficit that we see, so a reduction by 30 to 40% of this inhibitory input by SST cells, as shown here, what you do is you actually increase, and you look at the quality of capturing a signal in this model. You can see that we have an increase to the right, this increase the signal or decrease. You have a reduced signal to noise ratio. The signal is the same, but you increase the background noise. So it makes it much more difficult to discern true signal from false signal. And this is quantified here. You have an increase in false and failed detection rate. So basically it makes simple cognitive processing of information much more difficult. So for us, it's another evidence that these deficits are potentially linked to cognitive deficit in the context of human depression, the human conditions. So we went on over the next few years to develop a molecule that could reactivate this pathway. The target here is this alpha-5 GABA-A receptor. So GABA-A receptor, these are chloride channels, they're very well known. There's a very large diversity in those receptors, formed by the assembly of multiple subunits. These are the target of benzodiazepines. Benzodiazepines are non-selectively targeting. They bind to a different site, this benzo site, but they do non-specifically through a series of those GABA-A receptors, more specifically that include the alpha-1, 2, 3, and 5 subunits. And genetic manipulation have shown that those different subunits, because of the localization, both at the cell level and the regional level, they mediate different function. If you engage alpha-1, you get the sedation effect of benzo. If you do the alpha-2, you have the anxiolytic effect of benzo. The alpha-5 has been known from basic science that it's involved in cognition, but there hasn't been any drug that specifically augment the function of the alpha-5 by stay away, especially from the alpha-1, because you would want to have, if you want a next generation benzo where you don't mask this potential pro-cognitive effect. So we've done that over the last 10 years, developed new molecules, patented them, validated through multiple features that multiple studies that I don't have time to show you now. It's mostly published. Just let me show you what those molecules do in preclinical model. So you can take a mouse, put it in this Y maze, and in this Y maze, a mouse will have to remember which arm it previously visited. A mouse does very well. Over 7 to 8 tests, over a period of time, mice perform at 80 to 90% accuracy. So it remembers well. If you now stress this mouse using this, this various model, chronic restraint, unpredictable chronic mice stress, if you want the equivalent of making their life miserable, inducing a depressive-like phenotype in mice, the multiple behavior changes that you can measure, but importantly, you can see now that, not too good with this pointer here, you can see that after stress, a mouse will perform at 50% chance, which means basically this is random. The mouse does not remember. So you induce a cognitive deficit, male, female, same results, and we show now that either after just an acute treatment with those novel, what we call alpha-5 PAM, the positive allosteric modulator of the alpha-5 GABA-A receptor, so they augment the function. It's much more gentle, if you want, than a straight agonist. We can reverse those cognitive deficit acutely as well after chronic treatment. Chronic is critical here because you know that benzo tend to desensitize. This is a very different approach, different subunit. So we've done that. We replicated that across different models. Again, similar result in male and females. Not only that, but when you do chronic treatment, 4 weeks of treatment with those novel alpha-5 PAM, we can actually reverse the deficit in spine in both hippocampus and frontal cortex, so suggesting that we change, we affect the underlying pathology. We've done that now across multiple models. On top, you have the behavior after chronic stress, during aging, different models of Alzheimer, either amyloid or phospho-tau. You see that we can reverse the cognitive deficit in those models. And the bottom, you can see that we can reverse to a very large extent, up to 80% side effect size, the spine deficit that is seen in all these models. At the bottom, we just show that we affect all type of development of spine. So just a couple of slides. So based on that, we've I would say my summary here is that we've identified this microcircuit-based pathology, new drug target. We developed new molecules, created a company a couple of years ago. It's called Demona Pharma to bring those molecules to the clinic. We have a lead molecule identified, characterized. We just got clearance from the FDA to start phase 1 trial, probably in January, February. We're wrapping up the funding. So phase 1 in 2025, we use QEEG as biomarker for target engagement. Phase 2, proof of concept, cognitive deficit in depression, Alzheimer, probably in 2026. And I think, again, importantly, we have a potential here to do not just symptomatic targeting, but disease modifying by reversing the spine loss that is associated with those conditions. So what's next? So this is just a very short summary, short talk, give you where we are on this project. But we have other similar approaches where the very famous BDNF track B downregulation in the context of multiple disorder associated neuroplasticity. So we're targeting this pathway. We've found a way to do it, and we have two compounds, preclinical proof of concept. And the next one would be to target reduced neuropeptide in aging and brain disorder. So the concept stage, but again, different approach based on those broken links, again, those vulnerability factor in the pathway, in the context of age-brain disease interaction. So with this, just like to thank the multiple people who've helped throughout the years. I think Christine Glorious, as you mentioned, were probably in the lab when some of these early thoughts came, so it's been a long road. The people that underline are people who went on and developed their own lab at other institutions since then. So thank you very much, and I think we have time maybe for a couple of questions.
Great talk. I was just wondering, because there is a correlation between benzodiazepine use and early dementia, do you think that's more due to its non-specific hit in multiple subtypes, or do you think based on like a downregulation of GABA resulting in that effect? Since it's, I guess, I'm so used to thinking of chronic GABAergics as more pro-aging.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a concept change there by targeting this subunit. And my short answer is I don't know the details of whether causing, those negative increased dementia in the context of chronic benzodiazepine. But benzodiazepine, especially through the alpha-1, the alpha-1 receptor is localized everywhere on the pyramidal cells, everywhere in the brain, in the periphery. So you have a huge kind of input, huge increase in inhibition throughout, which is known to be inducing various downregulation, adaptive changes. So this is the main reason why we have all those side effects. And it does mask the effect at alpha-5. So we see none of those with alpha-5. For other reasons, we don't have to talk now. We don't have time to talk now, but the kinetics of trafficking of the alpha-5 are very, very different. They don't desensitize. These are the extrasynaptic, low affinity. So they're always tonically activated by just low ambient GABA. So in the system is built in a non-desensitization approach. So anyway, we can talk more.
Hi, just out of curiosity, for your preclinical models that you looked at, were there any differences in sex? Did you look at, for example, in mice, both male and female mice, and are there any differences in sex?
Yeah, all our studies from the beginning always include male and female. We had some sex difference in some early study with earlier compounds that were less specific to alpha-5, where we had a little greater effect for antidepressant. antidepressant effect in females. With those more advanced alpha-5 PAM, we have no sex difference.
And then also,
but the underlying pathology may be more robust in women. So in the clinic, we may have greater therapeutic efficacy in female because the baseline is different.
Yeah, makes sense. And then what is your delivery mechanism for your compounds?
It's just an oral pill.
Oral pill.
This is very good brain penetration. We have, so this is all part of our IND application to the FDA. We did all toxicity, PK, PD, just oral pill, hopefully once a day. Good, well, thank you very much.